This is the 265th vlog on this particular YouTube channel, and it starts right now. It was a week where I'd come into the vlog not having played a single session of poker, but my girlfriend Anna and I did make the trip to Donner Summit to hike through historic Tunnel 6 of the tunnels of the original Transcontinental Railroad built in the 1860s, because that is always fun to do. And it came on a trip that included a stop at Anna's favorite spot to get some food, Old Town Tap in Truckee. It was also a week when I, for the first time ever, nailed a Wordle in 2 guesses. So I got that going for me. I had looked at the list for 0510 No Limit Hold'em at Peppermill as it was forming at around 10:30 a.m. And the initial lineup looked atrocious. So I decided the play was to wait until the second game developed on Table 5, which parenthetically is my favorite table to play at. And as is usually the case, when one attempts something like that, the first game actually might have been better after all. But in this case, it was pretty much a wash. Both games were not great, but had spots where action could come from. I'd get in the 7th seat and start rolling video around noon, though unfortunately I wouldn't get video of the first hand. By the way, the professor was in this game after a long hiatus, but unfortunately for him and one other player, they'd both get stacked by another player named Ben who went runner quads against a flopped flush and a river bigger flush when pocket kings didn't want any part of folding. I figured the first hand I'd end up playing would be against the professor. Instead, it was against Johnny Utah. I opened Queen Jack of Spades in the hijack and got called by the cutoff in the big blind. And with 105 in, the flop would come out King Jack Jack, 2 hearts giving me trips. Check to me, and I bet 50. Special Agent Utah continues along from the cutoff with the big blind going out. And with 205 in, the turn is an offsuit 5. I bet about 3/4 pot, making it 150. I really thought that he was actually going to go out here, but sure enough, he sticks around. That probably wasn't as big of a surprise as it was for Bodie when he found out that he jumped out of the plane without a parachute, but you get the idea. With 505 in, the river is another 5, giving me jacks full of 5s. It's certainly possible that he missed a draw here. Obviously, if that is the case, I should check to him. And Johnny Utah, being the young guy, he's pretty aggressive. But I felt that it was just a little more likely that he would have top pair in this spot and might think that I was the one that missed a draw. So with that in mind, I bet 225, looking to get called by a hand like King 10 in this spot. He made a comment about wanting to get on the vlog, and unfortunately for him, it would come in a losing effort. As he does pay off, I show my hand, and he mucks, and a $955 pot gets shipped over to me. I then proceed to give him $100 of that back after I called a raise with Jack 9 of hearts and flop top pair, before opting to simply bet fold that hand on the flop, hoping that he had me beat. And it was kind of weird because right after the hand, he just looked at me and said, "I am an FBI agent!" I'd lose about 4 small pots over the next 90 minutes, unable to get much going. 3 of those hands I lost came in the form of paying $25 per hand in bomb pots and swinging and missing. But I'd get a piece of both flops in this next bomb pot. We, of course, go directly to the flop with 225 in. I pick up King, Queen of Spades, middle position 2. I flop a pair of kings on one board and the second nut flush draw on the other. Check to me, and I bet 100 with it, trying to build this pot up. Low jack calls, and the professor calls from the cutoff. And with 525 in, I don't improve on either board on the turn. But I'm certainly not going to be slowing down here just yet, having so much equity on both. I bet 200. Low jack calls quickly, and after that happens, I figured it was going to be pretty obvious that the professor wasn't going anywhere, and sure enough, he sticks around. And with 1125 in, the river card is not ideal. On one board coming in ace, but as you can see on the other, it's more than ideal, giving me the king high flush. I bet 400 here, hoping that sizing would get one of these guys to pay off, thinking that a pair on each board would be a call in this spot. But, to my surprise actually, neither of these guys actually gives this much thought at all, and both muck and I scoop a bomb pot, a rare occurrence, no doubt. This is a mid-session update. For those of you who would consider yourselves to be, and I know some of you would, Kayla superfans, I have news that you need to hear at the end of the vlog. I'd raise pocket 10s under the gun to 35 and get 4 callers. With 175 in, the board would come out Queen, Jack, Deuce, Rainbow. And with a below average board, I just checked this. To my surprise, no one bets. And the turn rolls off the 9 of clubs, which certainly gives me a great deal of hope. I figured I could get away with just betting small here and seeing what happens, hoping that most of these guys have missed. But also knowing that if they have flopped a pair of jacks or a pair of queens, they're probably not folding if I bet 125 here. So I toss in those 2 green chips. MP1 calls, and the hijack does as well. So with 325 in, the river is interesting. It's another 9. I check. MP1 also checks, and then the hijack bets 150. Now, there are a lot of guys who, if you watch them play over years worth of sample size, you will simply never see them get to the river, bet, and when called, say, good call. There's just a lot of guys that have that policy in their game of never bluffing with nothing on the river. I've seen it a lot. And to modify one of my favorite movie lines ever, there are some guys that bluff here, and there are some guys that don't. Now, this isn't quite a guy that doesn't bluff here, but it's almost a guy that doesn't bluff here. So I was at a loss, because I just think he's checking back his queens and jacks here, and only betting if he happens to have trips or better, or the occasional misdraw. But having to worry about the other guy as well, I would just fold the hand, and I felt a little bit worse about doing that when the guy behind me mucked as well. And I may or may not have gotten bluffed. We did get a $35 open by the player on my right, and I looked down at pocket aces in the hijack. I 3-bet to 125 here. Johnny Utah cold calls on my left.
He's a fucking federal agent!
And it folds back around to the low jack, who completes. With 380 in, the board comes out 3-3 deuce rainbow. Hardly what I was expecting, to say the least. Pretty interesting. Check to me, and I found myself with delusions of grandeur in this spot. So I bet big. I bet 250, because how are any big overpairs gonna fold here? How are pocket 9s finding a fold here? It just didn't seem all that likely to me. Turns out, I don't think I was up against a single one of those hands I just mentioned, because both of these guys fold immediately. We then get a man sitting down in the game who is a slightly better soccer player than me, followed by Johnny Utah, winning a big pot off the professor straight over set. You'll often find times where guys are contemplating a call and will show their hand to the table. And despite a one-liner out there, after the professor did that, I knew there was no way that set was hitting the muck and that Utah was getting paid off, and sure enough, he did. I was running short on time and was hoping that I'd be able to vlog one more interesting hand. And sure enough, it would happen against the man whom I have no desire to get into a penalty kick shootout with.
There goes Gomez. The header, and it's a goal! A golazo for Brian Neyron! The own goal in the first half, and now the most beautiful goal he has ever scored! Blasted straight from the corner, and DC United, after only 11 minutes, has gone from down a goal to up a goal. Unbelievable!
I open King 10 of clubs under the gun. The former MLS star calls in the low jack. And with 85 in, we go heads up to Queen 7-3 2 clubs. I bet right out for 50, and he min raises me here. Suffice it to say, I'm making the call, and with 285 in, the turn gives me the flush while pairing the board. Usually these types of raises that we saw on the flop are indicative of top pair types of hands. Usually. However, I've still seen it enough where they can be sets a small percentage of the time. And obviously, if that's the case, I'm drawing dead. So, to keep top pair hands like Queen Jack in there, and to hopefully not lose $2,000 if I happen to be up against a set, I just bet a black chip. And he doesn't take too long with it, and calls. So with 485 in, the river is a brick, and now it's on me. Operating under the same thought process, I bet out for 200 this time, which was pretty much the most I figured I could get out of a hand like Queen Jack. This time he gives it a great deal of thought. He certainly didn't love the idea of paying me off on this vlog any more than I liked the idea of defending a corner kick from him. But he still calls, creating an $885 pot. I show my hand, and he mucks. So my last hand of the day would be a profitable one as I head out the door. All right, it's a little before 6 o'clock, wrapping up, cashing out, booking a win of $1,050. Normally, I don't have a hard out on Thursdays, but I've got Austin with me tonight, so I got to go pick him up. Glad that despite a shorter session than normal due to family obligations, it was still a profitable one. All right, if you've been with this vlog for the last several years, then you know that a big segment of it, and a popular segment at that, has been Kayla Corner. Her shenanigans have really been a great addition to this vlog. Hilarious. Kind of one of these things that was unexpected. Like, I just started doing it for fun, and she embraced it and started to roll with it, and then people, of course, started recognizing her. It's one of these things that just kind of became a phenomenon in and of itself. Well, unfortunately, some tough times for our girl. The story is, and there's a more detailed explanation that you'll see online, but the long and short of it is that dating back to her pregnancy, she had a complication with regards to a hernia issue and had to have surgery on that again. And that's a rough surgery. And she's going to be out for, I'm not exactly sure how long, but I can't imagine it's going to be exactly an overnight thing, to say the least. So, when it comes to employees of casinos, if they're not making any money on tips, they're not exactly raking in the dough, to say the least. They rely on those to make a living. Those of us that play in the poker rooms, obviously, we do our part to give out those tips. But I was just hoping that those of you who are fans of Kayla Corner might be able to help our girl out during a rough time like this, because being a single mom and having the responsibilities of that, and now not being able to come into work for however long this is going to be rough financially. So we got a link set up in the description below. I think it was my guy Eric Nelson actually that set that page up, and Eric is like the nicest guy ever, so I'm not surprised that he'd be the guy to spearhead that effort. So a shout out to him for doing it. So go ahead and get on there, and hey, Kayla may not be working, but that doesn't mean that you can't tip her right now. Hashtag tip Kayla, and help her out during what's going to be a tough time. That'll wrap it up for this edition of the vlog. Hit those like and subscribe buttons and follow along on Instagram at bendeach, and we're back here next time.
I can hear the demons call when they do what they do, and now I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. I just gotta get through, I just gotta get through. Cause I feel like taking off, find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know that time can heal it all, I just gotta get through. Sometimes I feel like all is lost, but I know it's not true. I wanna put up all my walls cause I'm not in the mood, but then I cut myself off from the rest of the room. I know that time can heal it all if you're patient, and soon it can all be worth it.